I'm so glad we're all here. Let me pray for us this morning, and then we'll go around and introduce and tell our kids' ages, and we'll plunge right into SWR, okay? Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this day. God, thank you for those in attendance today. Lord, I pray for those that wanted to be here but couldn't because of illness. I pray that you would help them recover and be well. Father, I pray that you would be honored in these small, tiny things that we do, Lord, each day in and day out, and that you would enable us to see your truth, goodness, and beauty through spelling to write and read, and through grammar and the beauty that is therein. Lord, we thank you for it, and we just lift this time to you and pray you would be honored. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so first I'd like to go around and state your name and your campus and the ages of your children. So my name is Darla Lynn. I serve as principal at the South Campus this year. I have 4 children, 1 graduate of the school who graduated last year, and then I have a senior this year at the academy and a freshman in 9th grade, both upstairs, and then a 6th grader at the South Campus. So I did the blended model. I started with Veritas back in the very origins of Veritas days with my one that graduated last year. And so I've been in the trenches and enjoyed it and thoroughly enjoyed it. And I hope to convey to you today a vision for the future, because if you guys are parents of little ones, I want to if I could, in any way, draw you up and say, it is worth it. It is worth it. And to come alongside and encourage and help with tips and pointers as I can along the way. So thank you for being here. Okay, so today we're going to talk about our phonics curriculum, which takes in spelling and beginning reading, as well as then our grammar curriculum. So BlendedU, the purpose, the overall purpose of BlendedU is to come alongside primarily our blended parents, like you guys, understanding that you are teaching right there along with us. So we are co-teachers, and we provide significant training for our teachers in these materials, and we want to offer to you the training. We don't have to go quite to the extent that we do with our teachers, but so that you can come alongside and have knowledge and a working understanding of things when you're at home on those home days. So today, my goals for today are, if I can, to impart an enthusiasm and appreciation for the curriculum, such that each of you will feel fully equipped to engage your students in these subjects at home, okay, and interested and enthusiastic about it. I hope to be able to answer questions that you may have about the curriculum as you've encountered as you go along and have engaged with the curriculum. Also, if I can, and please, anybody speak up to provide tips and how-tos and what do you do at home and how do you drill these things, and that's what I feel like part of this is too, is that you guys can share among each other, that we can get to know tips and methods and stuff for those home days. So real quickly, I want to tell you my history with SWR. So when I started at the academy, it was funny, I was hearing you say, y'all say, I'm just not grammar school. Well, I started the academy with my children. I have no doubt that that's where the Lord wanted us to be. I was not prepared in any way, shape, or form to homeschool. In fact, I was anti-homeschool, like no way am I homeschooling, and the Lord impressed upon us that, well, maybe not fully, but you're going to do this. And so when we started with Veritas, we started with the Saxon curriculum in both math and phonics, and I remember the sheets coming home, and my level of ignorance, like I don't remember how I learned to read, which probably means I did not use phonograms, but when a sheet came home, and I didn't even know that the letters TH make more than one sound, right? So one page came home and it had a thimble, and I'm like, yeah, TH, the thimble, and then feather, and how that sounds different, the versus the, blew my mind. Like, I was one of those moms calling the teacher like, what the heck does this mean, So I really came from zero knowledge of phonograms and having an understanding. But when we switched over to SWR, that was my 3rd year with Veritas, I missed the workshop, the parent workshop on Introduction to SWR, and I thought, oh no, you know, I'm in bad shape. But somebody recommended to me, in your packet, your curriculum packet, you get a red book and you get a brown book. Sit down and read the red book. And really to go through the red book is to have an understanding of the training and where these people are coming from and kind of what their intent is in these exercises. And so I'm going to step through somewhat with these steps that, because I read through the red book and then I went and had, well, actually not through the whole red book, just the first 11 steps. And then I went and had coffee with a teacher friend of mine and she said, yep, that's it, you've got it. So, and the other thing that I felt like I got from the first 11 sections of the red book is an understanding of why we do it this way. Why are they so strict about the way that the letters are formed, or the way that we say a certain thing, or why can't we say the name of the letter, why do we have to say the sound of the letter, and all of that, and that's all explained in the first few sections of this book. So what I'm going to try and go over and highlight what stood out to me as I went through it, and what helped me to gain an understanding. And then I'm going to go through some of the how-tos and what it looks like in the classroom as far as dictation and what your students are experiencing in the classroom. And then, you know, I'll open it up for questions, okay? So question posed, what is the sub-skill that best predicts future reading success? Answer, the most powerful predictor for reading success is the student's ability to hear and manipulate sounds in words. And so, again, it's going back to what is a phonogram, what is a phonetics. It's that, that piece of a word that makes a particular sound unique, and so that you can, and so the idea with SWR is to put those sounds together, pull them apart. Sounds like math and focus, right? With our number bonds, we're bonding, we're putting together, we're taking apart, we're putting together, we're taking apart. It's the same concept here, just so that the kids are manipulating and working with these things so that they can get a mastery over them. So step 1 in the book is talking about supplies and references, mostly. If you get your, when you order your SWR packet, you have most of your supplies that you're going to need for this curriculum, okay? So you'll get a red book, you'll get a brown book, you'll get your cards, your phonogram cards, you'll get your rule cards, and then I think, and you guys might be able to, if you have to order these separate, okay, because if you're K through 2nd, you get this as a learning log, and then 3rd through 5th, you work with this as your learning log. And we'll talk a little bit more about the logs later.
There's a CD that comes with it now, too.
And the CD, yes, I'm sorry, I don't have my CD, but yes.
And there is an app.
There's an app, excellent. That's excellent to know, like that has the sound, that's like the CD. Okay, very good.
It's one. Well worth the editing costs $5.
$5 app, okay.
What's the name of it?
SWR. Yeah, SWR.
Okay, good to know, thank
It's
you.
a little red circle with a pencil and like a piece of paper and a book side by side. It's very cool.
Okay, good to know. So in addition to these, there's one of the things that they recommend as a possible reference, and that is the alphabetical listing of all the words that your teachers might have. There was a couple of times where, in the later years, where I thought that might be handy to have, just as we played with the words and messed around. But other than that, really, I wouldn't recommend, you know, that any of these are necessary. Of course, if you're on your homeschool days, if at all possible, I do recommend a whiteboard. I know that this is kind of going back to the beginning of the year. I know that everybody can't have a schoolroom set up with a whiteboard convenient. If there's any way even you could have an easel with a, you know, and bring one in. My whiteboard was just my favorite thing for my home days. And the kids could use it. We put all of our assignments on it, and the kids used it to scratch off, but also for things like math and phonograms and things like that. I just found my whiteboard to be priceless, a priceless tool. So, so the next step, it talks about even before, kind of like pre-readers, preschoolers, and how to get their ears starting to focus on not the full sounds, but the pieces of words. You know, not the full word, but what they're made up of. And that has to do with the gluing and ungluing. Probably the easiest thing to start with is compound words, right? So I'll say 2 words, and you push them together and make 1 word. Rain and bow. Now push those words together. And what do you make? You have rainbow, right? And so just trying to get the kids, even before they're reading, oriented towards this program and oriented towards listening for phonograms, individual phonograms. Another game that they encourage to get your child familiar and ready for this program is the clock, is to get them used to the clock and the way the numbers are laid out on the clock, because it's so key to when we start writing the phonograms, and we can use that clock as number and reference points when we're starting our handwriting program. And one thing that is so interesting to me that I discovered at that time when I read through this, and even just as I've been studying for this, these people are crazy about this stuff. I mean, they're like crazy about this stuff. They think about everything and all the little particulars, and they explain why it's important. For instance, why the clock letters are important and why it's so important to focus on getting your children to hold their pencil correctly and form their letters correctly. And even to the extent of when you're doing your dictation or you're at the board, to stand on this side of the word and do everything oriented left to right, so that they're always orienting themselves, and the way that they're looking things are always left to right, the way that we read. You cross your T's left to right, you cross your F's left to right, always left to right, and it's always with the purpose of so that they become comfortable with the way things should be, right? And they're not having to undo bad habits. And so I want to tell you that as a mom, I was one of those moms that had to sit next to my kindergartner and say, hold your pencil correctly, hold your pencil correctly, hold your pencil correctly, hold your pencil correctly, okay? All the time. And that is so disheartening. I know it is. So I want to hear y'all I want y'all to hear me say I've been there. But with the vision further for their ultimate success and their thriving with this program and beyond, it's worth it. It's worth it, okay? In the third section, it talks about reading aloud to all ages. I think probably all of us know the value in reading aloud and how important that is with our children individually and then as a group, as we have multiple children. I would say one thing I would like to point out is the to all ages. Don't think that your kids outgrow it, okay? And so even when, like, with my kids, we kind of had, although they're all very close, there was kind of a bigger gap between the 2 older and the 2 younger. And so I would read books to the 2 younger, and I would find that the older ones were kind of hovering around the doors. They still like to listen to those stories. And for children to hear you read and present those things, that's important. Also, next month for BlendedU, we're going to be touching on narration. They touch on narration here. Again, as a skill, meaning I'll tell you a story and then you tell it back to me. That again, it just has them, it trains them to pay attention and be paying attention and listening. Of course, also listening to all the inflection and everything affects how they will read. In step 4 here, it talks about evaluating their achievement level. So a lot of this is done at the school, okay? okay? We do the placement for the spelling lists. We do the DRA. They have some recommended things that for you guys, as far as, you know, again, this is why we choose this model in part, right? Is because at school it's 1 versus 15, but at home it's one-on-one, and so you can know your individual student and where they are and where their strengths are and where their weaknesses are, and shore up their strengths. Shore up their weaknesses and help them work from their strengths, and bring an awareness to them of those things as well. So they talk about like finding, running the tests, so like it's a placement test for the spelling lists. Also, they recommend, and I thought this was a great idea, again, we do it with the DRA, but we don't record it, but recording your student reading, and then, you know, 6 weeks later, do it again, the same passage, and 6 weeks later, or even a quarter or a semester, and listen to how they progress throughout the year. For one thing, it's encouraging to both of you, right? Because they are getting better. They are. Sometimes you don't sense that, but they are. I thought that was a great tip. Also, there's some comprehension resources. The McCall Crabs has written many years ago wrote a series of comprehension tests that basically read this passage, answer these few little questions, and it kind of helps you know, is your kiddo on track with comprehension. I know me personally, one of my kids, and he was almost all the way through grammar school before it kind of dawned on me that he's not quite getting it in some of the reading, and it was this comprehension piece that he was missing, and so we're trying to work on that more with him.
What was it called? Sorry.
McCall Crabs. And so they have, in my book, which is the ancient version of this, they have a little example of it. But then I reached out to Mrs. Taylor, and she has like the whole series. And so if you want, I have it right now, so you can't look at it real soon, but she would have that as a resource for you to kind of look through and kind of see how it's laid out. It's just a couple simple paragraphs to read and then answer the questions, and based on how many questions they answer or how far they get, you kind of can get an idea of where they are on the comprehension scale of things. Also, a focus of SWR is penmanship. And so many of the things that they write are focused on neatness and penmanship, and if I could just get soapboxy a little bit, okay, I think this is something that is neglected these days, and I think that people in general are thinking, I've heard many things, well, we don't need to know, we're going to be typing, and so we don't necessarily need nice handwriting. Why are we learning cursive? Nobody writes in cursive. Nobody needs cursive anymore. Well, from a classical perspective, okay, we're in a classical school, so I hope that you guys understand that we consider penmanship important, okay? So to make something, to take the effort and make it and write it neat, again, it's worth it. There's value in that. And there's loveliness, right? There's truth, goodness, and beauty in nice penmanship, okay? And so if you could encourage your kids and to do their best. And like one of my kids, he was hilarious. You could tell when he was having a bad day or when he was tired or, and I'd say, how about we just stop and rest or do something, and so that we can come back at a time when we can do this in a lovely way, and just trying to focus on that, on penmanship. So step 5 in my book is full of information. There is a lot of stuff in here. And it says, and one of the things that I found the most interesting, and again, where I was like, oh my goodness, these people love this stuff, is, have you considered how we use our throat, lips, teeth, palate, and tongue to produce the common sounds of English? And so they have all these exercises. They encourage you, like, look in a mirror and look what shape your mouth makes as you're making these sounds. and touch your throat. And so, for instance, one of the first ones they have is everybody put your hand on your throat right here and make the sound of a B. Now make the sound of a P. So they say with B, you have your motor on, like you're using your vocal cords down here to breath, send the breath over, and you can feel that. And it's the same with the sound like of F versus V. Again, those two are related, but one is you have your motor on and one you don't. And it talks about resistance and using the nose and try and, so one of our phonograms is NG, the nasal right? Try and say that when you're holding your nose. Right? and so the studies that they've done and that they encourage you to do and to think about how those sounds, how they're created in your mouth and in your throat. And anyway, and these are things that maybe I feel a little silly encouraging y'all to do, but the kids love it. I mean, and it's very interesting to them to think about how, wow, that's interesting, and I've never noticed that before. So in Section 5, they define a phonogram. A phonogram is a single letter or fixed combination of letters that symbolizes the sounds of speech. We have 26 letters in English, but 45 sounds and 70 basic phonograms. So, in case somebody's asking, what is a phonogram? It has tips on stirring the student's interest and how, for your young ones, trying to tell to what extent they're ready to kind of move up into reading and writing. It also has a, oh, I know what. One of the things that I've had even come up on my campus this year is if you hold up a letter and they say B, and the point is that we don't want them to look at this and say B, right? We want them to say B. Whether they know the name or not, we really don't care, okay? And but there are some students, we've had a student at our campus that insists, that's the letter B, and my mom says it's a B, and I love this. It says to ask students what sound a cat makes. Meow. Well, cat is the name for the animal, and meow is the sound that it makes. So B is the name of the letter, but it represents the sound B. And so when we're building words together and putting them together, we want to use the B. We want to use the sound that it makes and not its name. Section 5 talks about how this approach is better than others. It cites studies and research. And it also talks about avoiding some practices that might be harmful. So one of them is to just try to avoid, and again, it's not, there's a balance, but just don't call it B. Always, whenever you're looking at the letters, to use the sound the letter makes and not the name of the letter. And to use, it has tips about using just, like you'll notice all their cards, they don't have picture clues or anything that go along with that, because studies have shown that kind of slows down the comprehension with the kiddo if they're thinking, baby or whatever, that can slow that down. And so there's just little tips like that. So another thing that I think is helpful with this curriculum to understand is, so some of these phonograms and the way that they're put together, they feel and sound forced, like almost really you're going to pronounce it that way so that it fits in your little phonogram world, and with an eye roll. But one of the emphases that they make here is our primary focus is what we must think to spell it correctly. So they said, and they also talk about how they're less concerned with the pronunciation of words, because for one thing, from region to region, words are pronounced differently, and but across the board, they're pretty much spelled the same. So, so for instance, they bring up the word human, okay? So if we were to say, you know, human, they would tend to spell it M-U-N at the end, right? So we say H-U, and then think to spell man, okay? And so what we want the kids to think is to think how we're going to spell it. So I would venture to guess that some of you in your own working through life and spelling have come up with these. Like me personally, I learned to spell beautiful by be-a-beautiful, right? So every time I think the word beautiful and I'm writing it, I have to say be-a-beautiful. Or Israel, right? For me to say Israel, I put Israel, so I can get that A-E right. Okay, and so there's some of our, I tend to think some of our own habits, you know, for spelling correctly, they've just indoctrinated, incorporated, you know, in their program. So the next section is starting to write the phonograms and learn to write them. So we start with the single letter phonograms. The curriculum, I will say that here's where the Academy takes somewhat of a departure from SWR. SWR is big on starting with cursive right from the get-go. We do not. We start with manuscript in kindergarten, first and second. In third grade, we start learning the cursive letters, and then at the second semester of third grade on, we're pretty much exclusively cursive.
So they do not start learning cursive in second grade? Or they do?
I don't think so.
I heard that they did, so that's why I'm just curious.
They might. Do you have a second grader?
I will next year.
I'm working with a second grader and
they're doing cursive. Okay, great. So we start cursive, I guess, in second grade then. Okay, good to know. And then in second, I'm pretty sure that second semester, third grade is when it's all cursive from that point on. So
everything they turn in should be in cursive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So all their spelling lists and everything will be in cursive at that point. I know that early on, and I consulted with our kindergarten teachers at South, and our handwriting books, if you guys have been through those with our curriculum, sometimes we skip around. We're skipping around to coincide with the SWR program. So SWR starts with the clock letters, the ones that start, like if you're looking at a clock, you know, they start at 2 and go over to 10. So A and, you know, D and those, and we try and pick out those pages in our handwriting as we're going along with them on with our phonics programs. The recommendation of this curriculum is to introduce these things somewhat quickly and move through it and move on. So even before mastery, because sometimes if you get stuck on, you know, they're just not getting it, sometimes it helps just to move on. And so even before all the single letter phonograms are completely mastered, we're moving on to the multi-letter phonograms and the spelling lists. And that's intentional, to keep things moving along. And that's somewhat classical too. I mean, I know that when in the early Veritas days, we talked about how, like, these grammar rules and jingles and all of this, you know, like in second grade, they're starting to learn about adverbs and things like that, and that sometimes it's later that really clicks in, you know, and some of these spelling rules also that seem complex and wordy and full of stuff for our little ones, that we want that in there, though, for when they start encountering these concepts, right, that they've got something they can pull up. The next section in the book talks about teaching the students numbers, and so they, again, just as part of our penmanship, and they use the numbers in some of the markings on the words, and so they go through the numbers. The next step in here is introducing the learning log. So the quote from the book that I took is, the class creates a specialized spelling textbook. And so each year, your student will create their own spelling textbook. And that's one thing I like about this curriculum. And this is something that they encourage to, if you do it according to, and your teachers should be helping them do it according to the way that it's listed out, then you find exercises where you're manipulating the words across the pages and all of that over time. This was mine, okay? I started one when my kids were little and did these first few steps. And so I got as far as I put my table of contents in the front. And I filled out my reference page. So these, of course, the little 3M strips are very helpful to get back here to the back to the reference page, the consonant and vowel page, and then the multi-letter phonogram page. And then, like I told you, I felt like after I had done this, I was ready to go. You know, I had my list day, I was ready. But by the time we were off to the races, I felt like I really had a pretty good understanding. And then I would refer to the kids' books, you know, for things that I needed. So in the older grades, the references are up in the front. It's somewhat at the teacher's discretion and time as to how much of all of this is going to be filled out. If I can encourage you, I think this is all great stuff, you know. So when on your list you come up to the word 8, you know, oh, well, let's go back to the number page and write the number 8 and write the figure 8 and write 8, you know, and all of that. So they're all helpful. Your teachers will do it to some extent, but they won't be, you know, filled out completely thoroughly for the most part. But in the older grades, these are up at the front, and then the spelling list starts here. This is my son's book, and he got a little free and easy with some of his. I know in the workbooks they talk about keeping it nice and neat and clean, and my son didn't get that concept quite. So, but he made it all his, right? So anyway. So that's kind of how the book is laid out. So they are every week, they're going to fill out a spelling list, and they occasionally are going to refer back here to the reference pages. Okay, same in the black book. They'll be filling out every week with the dictation. They'll be going out and filling in their spelling list. As they get older, they'll be writing sentences at the bottom using words from the spelling list, and then they'll refer back to the back pages as the book instructs and as the teacher does that. So that's kind of the learning log.
So how should we use these on our home days? Because our assignments don't ever involve the learning
It
log.
never leaves the backpack.
Your learning logs never leave the backpack. Okay.
Yeah, so how should we be using them?
Okay.
Because based on what you're saying, they can be a tool and helpful, so.
They can be a tool. So I'm trying to
The
look.
lesson plans just don't include them.
Right.
Is basically our point. So how do we use them? I'm not even sure.
I've looked at it and I've been like, wow, they mark it with numbers and red pencil, and it's really impressive looking.
Yeah.
But I don't know anything about it.
Okay. So if your teacher does not have you pull them out and work with them, that's fine. Okay. If you are looking for some supplemental stuff, so as you in the Brown book, in the Wise Guide where your spelling lists are, they have exercises that you can look over. And sometimes it's interesting, you'll hit a certain list and they'll say, if you'll notice, words 1 through 10 are all adjectives and words 11 through 20 are all nouns. So take an adjective and match it with a noun as an exercise for this list. Or some of the SWR, they recommend, you know, by the time you have these double pages, like read them across this way as fast as you can, you know, all 4 words. And just, again, to work with the words and familiarize yourself and the kiddos with them. I'm trying to think here. So I'm looking at section C in my Brown book, my Wise Guide, and the assignment says timed reading. Time a student reading from his own spelling notebook, starting with section A. Record the time it takes to read the page and periodically have the student compete with his own record until he can read the page smoothly at a normal talking speed. So things like that.
That was on big.
So also on that, and then the section, right under that in section C, it says, as you read across this page, some combinations sound right. Say ouch when one hurts our ears, then substitute the correct combination. So anyway, so there are exercises in the Brown Book, in the Wise Guide, where you can use those.
So take advantage of those as opposed to not read them at all. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure some people do.
Well, so here's the deal, guys. I mean, so when you get your assignment sheet from your teacher, and you get through it, and at the end of the day, you're like, oh my gosh, we're done, out, right? That's not the time to open up the Wise Guide and look for supplemental material, right? But if there are times when it's a light day, or, you know, believe it or not, as administrators, we do hear sometimes we need more stuff, right? This book is full of stuff, great stuff, that to go over with your students as they go through these lists and to familiarize them with the words. Also, you can double check their work and talk to them about their words and the markings. What do these markings mean? Have them explain them to you, you know. That's good and rich.
About that. So I know when they dictate the words, they count. Are you going to go over that with?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And my next question, when they give a spelling test, they don't do that, right?
Right.
They just say the word.
Right.
Student spells the word.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Okay, so then for the older kids, at that point, they'll start dictating the consonant and vowel page, which is this page back here at the reference. And they'll learn about, you know, to always put a U with their Q. And if the vowel, if it makes more than one sound, like a C that says K or S, they put a check mark over it, so they make those marks on their consonant and vowel page. And then they start as, again, this isn't early like in kindergarten, that like in second or third grade, they'll do this right away. Before they start their list, they'll do their multi-letter phonogram page, and they'll get these all filled out. So before, like in kindergarten, my understanding is before they start list A, they start introducing multi-letter phonograms. So these first four here, sh and SH, TH, double O, double E, and then ER, as in her, are introduced even before list A, even though none of them are used in list A. Again, that keeping that where you're kind of keeping up just a little bit ahead of where they're at. And then at school, the teacher, the final step here is to determine their placement in the Wise Guide. So that for a classroom, they give one of these diagnostic tests at the back, and wherever and there's a count for among the classroom at which word is the first missed word and how many words after that are missed as over general. Let's see, this on here is on page 199, and there's several of these different to kind of, and they determine their placement. Now, part of it is determined on as far as what list they start at, and on a classroom by classroom basis is determined on a pre-test like this, and part of it is the pacing that we want to keep so that we can finish all the lists by the end of 5th grade, you know, and that's at the discretion and the determination of the teacher on where they get started then with their lists at that point. Okay.
That
Okay.
makes sense, because we repeated some of our lists at the beginning of 1st grade for kindergarten.
Yes.
And I was confused.
I think at 1st grade you start again at the beginning. Did you start at A? Do you
did
know?
start all over?
We did. We just went through very quickly.
Okay.
Yes.
That's right.
So, and I was just speaking with my kindergarten teachers, so when they start dictating words, they start with 5 words a week, and then by the end of kindergarten, they work up to 10 words a week.
Yeah, like we're at 7 now.
And yes, and I believe in first grade, you can tell me,
Or 20.
do they start at 20 right from the
No,
get-go?
I think
We only
10.
did 10
We
a
started
few
at
times, but yeah. But we
Started
jump
at
up-
10 and then jump up to 20 fairly quickly.
Now, what's second?
I know. But at first 20-word list, I was like, oh. It's not been that bad.
Yeah.
But at first I was like, wow, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
But yeah, I'm curious as to know, like,
Yes, so
How
now,
they
my
increase.
understanding and my experience is that it's 20 words a week from then on.
Okay.
That, like, we don't ever jump, they talk in this reference about going to 40 words a week or something like that. We don't do that.
Okay.
We don't do that. Okay, and so that's kind of pretty much working through the first 11 steps, and then on step 12 is begin the daily spelling list and the WISE guide. So, I will go over some of these things with you all and about try and give you an idea of what it looks like in the classroom, and so that you can have an understanding. Before I do that, if I can just encourage you as a fellow parent to, whenever the teacher says to go over the phonograms, go over the phonograms, okay? And I know that it's probably more boring for us than the kids, right? But to go over and over and over and over them again. And it's almost, like I said, eye roll worthy, or you feel that way by the time that you're going through it. I know, Mom, I know all the phonograms, and you're fighting your kids, and you're fighting your own will to continue. But it is so very helpful when the kids just can automatically recall these things. And so, and then as they go, then they'll start being introduced to rules. And some of the rules they'll learn right from the get-go, and some of them, like, they'll learn that Q always needs a U. U is not a vowel here, right? But they won't have a Q word, I don't think, for a while, you know? And so they'll have this when they need it. And so the kids, I would encourage you to only show the kids this side, but you definitely always choose this side. And then as they get older, it's fun. One of the games that we would do is I'd say, okay, you show me the cards. And it's hilarious trying to try. Have you done that?
we have, and I don't do very well.
I don't do very well either. I never did very well either, because without my crutch back there reading, it's hard. So, but those are things that if the kids, and I find even my kids in middle school and stuff, I'll recall back to these rules when we're talking about trying to spell certain words and doubling the last letter before adding a vowel suffix and things like that. You'll find they're useful. Again, if we think of the classical model, the grammar, dialectic, and rhetoric, the grammar is so much of equipping the kids with the tool belt, right? Of the tools that they can pull out and use in later years. So drill, drill, drill. Okay. So I'm going to hand out, I wasn't going to have any handouts, and then I was talking to my staff this morning, and they said, just show them how we do it in class, the fingergrams, and that seems to blow everybody's mind, and I wasn't going to do that, but I'm going to now.
Thank you.
And so I found some handouts that I had been given to me in the past as I've done this. And so when we talk about dictation, dictating a spelling list, this is pretty much what it looks like. So the idea being, and this is, I'm reading almost straight from the book here, but to employ all the avenues to the mind simultaneously. We link auditory, vocal, kinesthetic, and visual stimuli with logic. Multi-sensory instruction is the most powerful way to fix information firmly in the mind. Our students, with guidance from a teacher, write a word before seeing it. Next, they analyze the word and mark the spelling rules. So that's one thing that I love about this curriculum and that's so interesting to me, is that they're writing the word before they're ever seeing it on a page versus a traditional like spelling curriculum where you get your spelling words and you're told to write them 3 times or whatever. And so they're given specific instructions, and your kiddos are walked through this and trained in this in the classroom, and that by the end it's really a thing of beauty to watch a teacher, a skilled teacher, do their spelling lists, okay? But we will start with, so I have written on it, you can tell the last sheet that you have is one that was handed out to me when we've done this before. But I'm going to try and walk through this and as the teacher would in class on that first day for list A. Okay, so we've done all the single letter phonograms. We've introduced SH, TH, EE, OO, and ER as in her. And then the teacher will give specific instructions. So, dictate section title. In the first column, keeping a top guideline on the first baseline, center a capital A. I will show you how. And then the teacher will say, in the first column, under your letter A, close to the margin line, write top. Put the book on top. Top. So, and then the teacher says, okay, look at me. T, ah, p, t, ah, p. Think ah, o, u, t, ah, p. How many syllables? Let's clap it. Top. And the students all clap top. And then, okay, now pick up your pencil and write t, ah, p. Okay? Now read what you have written, and the students read their word, top. Okay? Now dictate it back to me. And so the teacher is up here, and the students say, t, ah, okay? Now the student proofreads, or the teacher says, okay, make sure that your word on your page looks like my word up here. And that's one of those skills, learning how to look at the board and look at your paper and recognize the same thing. Think to spell and we say the word top, and the students all say it, okay? So, likewise, in the first column, under top, we will write but. You can do that, but be careful. But. Okay, look at me. B, t, b, u, b, t. Okay? How many syllables? Let's all say it. But. 1 syllable. Okay, pick up your pencils and write b, t. Now read the word that you've written and dictate it back to me. The students will say b, t. Okay? Okay, analyze, look carefully at my paper here, at what I have on the board, compare it to what you have. Make sure they look alike. Okay? So some of these, I'm looking for something that is more.
Hey, could you do one of these a little harder? Where, like, for instance, we're on list 261 through 280. So,
Okay.
like, how would you do the word every? Because,
Okay.
we don't say every.
Yes.
Just
What
every.
list is that?
It's on page 36.
Okay,
It's
J1?
list- Yes.
Okay. So, students, under the word Y, over in the, up against the class margin, the paper margin, we will write every. The eyes of the Lord are in every place. Every. How many syllables? Every. 3 syllables. Okay? Look here. Is in her. And then yet it I. Okay? When you have more than, you kind of got to, but always do like
Separate syllables.
So separate hands for separate syllables. So is in her. The 2-letter phonogram is together like this, and then yet it I.
So the ya-a-I, like in this word, is just for the think to spell, because it doesn't say ya-a-I,
Think
it
to spell,
says
right?
E.
Think to spell.
Okay.
Yet I.
Okay.
And so it explains in the. I was just reading this the other night. The connection between Y and I, and how close that is. And so a lot of times, like I've had seen teachers do it, think to spell it, or think to spell it, every.
Okay.
Okay? Is what your students will hear at school.
Okay. And how do you suggest, because like whenever they come to us with their spelling words, they've already done all of this.
Mhm.
So what's the best way to maybe like more, and in maybe more of a timely manner, reinforce? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I guess, like, or do you still go through all this again at home, even though they've done it at school?
I think by the time, so theoretically, okay, by the time they've done this at school, they're ready to work with the words at home and manipulate them around in sentences or, with the homework assignments. Sometimes it's just a matter of write the words 3 times. Right.
Just for repetition.
Right. Use sentences, write sentences using 2 words in each sentence and things like that, just to gain a mastery of the word.
Would it be good to like say, teach me, how do you think to spell this word?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what did Mrs. Atkins tell you?
Yes,
Like that sort of thing?
absolutely,
Make 'em
absolutely.
do it.
Yeah, ask them about the markings on the word. So, and also on every, right? Then when they dictate it back here, is in her. Think to spell it. You say, are there any markings? There's a double-letter phonogram, and we underline the multi-letter phonograms, like that. So that'll be the marking in there. Is in her.
So essentially, they could pull out their learning log and teach us what they learned in class for that. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So their learning log should have all of it, every word plus the markings, split up by syllable with the markings in red.
Okay.
And that's a great exercise. Like, why is there a 3 over this? To have them explain.
Okay.
Sometimes when I dictate a spelling list to him, he wants to write it like they do in their learning log.
Mhm.
Is that okay for them to practice that?
On the spelling test, or
Yeah, like when I dictate and he is doing a practice test,
Yeah.
he really likes to do that.
to do the markings and
Move the
everything?
word- Yes.
Oh, yeah, and do the brackets and
Is
all of that?
Is that an okay thing to do at home, or should I encourage him to actually just write the word?
I think that's probably fine.
Okay.
Okay, I think if you get any other feedback from your teacher,
Okay.
I know sometimes when I was doing for me to feel like to help them have a mastery of the list, I would sometimes mix the words up too, so that the brackets don't come as easily. Then that would be a natural way to maybe try and, if you feel like that's a habit that you want to discourage on a regular basis. Also, I feel like if they know them in all sorts of orders, then there's a little bit more of a mastery there. So one of the words, was there a question? One of the words that was here was like season. Season is another one. So how many syllables? Season, 2 syllables, okay? So this is where, okay, I'm really retarded. But you know, when my teacher said, well, yeah, you can show them this. Here, I'll do it this way. E-A, right? And then, I think to spell A-O, A-O-U, A-O-U, right? That's why we have to think to spell that A rather than okay? And it's then the marking there, when we do the markings, we put the 2 over the S because it's making the Z sound. It's making a second sound.
So each finger represents a letter. So if it's a multi-letter phonogram, you have to use as many fingers as it is. So like good is just 1 syllable. It's
Right. Yeah.
So you would say ga. So like that's one of my our kindergarten. So you say ga, and then oo, o, da. Okay. Okay.
And those kids can recall those phonograms and then look at it.
I'm just going crazy just for their school days. I'm like,
I know. Well,
I'm like, if you
okay.
raise
So
me,
here's
I'm
the thing:
gonna have to
is that we learn this, and I want you guys to have a picture of this, but you don't really have to do it.
Right.
But if ever you have a kid, if ever you miss a day, which happens, right? Especially this time of year, don't be afraid to plunge in and do the spelling list and dictate a spelling list to your kiddo. And it's fun. The kids like it because usually they'll be able to correct you, you know, and so that's fun for them. And you can. And you're showing them, you're learning too, right? I mean, so you're kind of puzzling out in the book, now in your WISE guide, this is the word and the sentence, and then the markings are all here. So you'll know which, you know, so you can know what markings, like if you're dictating a list, you'll know, okay, you need to put a 2 over that S because it says its second sounds. Right? And so they'll have the markings, and then sometimes they have extra, they'll point to a rule or to something like that that will help also.
Spell and read really well as a result of this.
Well, they certainly have a better understanding of it than I did. Like, well, that doesn't look right. I don't know why, but yeah, I'm a believer in the program. So, real quickly, and I'm running out of time, which I thought I would have to be stretching into time. I'll go into Shurley English just very quickly. I think that it's very straightforward. There are some keys that if I can give to you all, I'll just tell you what I think is important for the kids as they go through the program, and then any questions that you all have, I'll try and take on. So, Shurley English. Again, I'll tell you a little bit. When I started it, we only had the workbooks. We didn't have the textbooks. And so we were really dependent on what they were doing in class, which was fine because they were pretty much learning it all in class. I think that so my goals for students after coming through Shurley English, there is some critique amongst educators of Shurley English that they, the scripted sentences are too restricted and that they, you know, not all sentences are written in the patterns that they have, and that's true. But I would say that that's something that we really address at the dialectic at the next stage. And so that if they can master this and manipulate and work with these, you know, these parts of speech and these, then they're ready. In 6th grade they start diagramming, and off to the races they go with, you know, hanging modifiers and all of that stuff, you know. But so my goal for students coming out of the Shurley English program is that they can recognize when things are right. When things, you know, like, I mean, as an adult, I finally am to the point where I feel like I can look at something and say, okay, that's not quite right, it needs to be, and that our students can know that with their capitalization and punctuation, and the way that you learn that is by doing it the right way over and over and over and over again. So also my other goal is, and this goes hand in hand, is just preparation for the next level, for practicum, which I asked Mr. Wadela, give me a definition for why we call writing and vocabulary and grammar and the dialectic school practicum. And it's like, well, the practical tools needed to be a good writer, right? And so that's what we're trying to supply them with at this level and then going on to the next. So the key elements I see of this curriculum are the jingles. Of course, everyone, jingles, jingles, jingles. The capitalization and punctuation rules, which sometimes I don't think are pointed out enough, like to us as parents, that there's a reference almost in the front of each book, and that is one little critique I have. Sometimes you've got to go searching for it, that has all the punctuation rules spelled out. And then, and as the kids do corrections and stuff, they're going to have to find the number of the rule that corresponds with what they're trying to make. Does this sound familiar? And it's the same with capitalization. All the capitalization rules and what they're going to encounter and why they should be capitalized. Those are good things to make copies of and have those as a reference, even as you go throughout the year. The other key, big key that I find in this curriculum is the question and answer flow. I call this the game changer. So this is something that I went to this workshop and our second grade teacher at Veritas was teaching it, and it just, oh, that changes everything. So the question and answer flow uses question and answers to identify the parts of the sentence, okay? Classifying is naming and labeling each word in a sentence to identify its job. So most of you that have been in this curriculum at all know that the homework sheets, they start out with classify these sentences. So you're going to go through the question and answer flow on several sentences. But just as a primer to the question and answer flow, so to classify a subject noun, you ask the subject question. What or who is doing the action in the sentence? And then you put SN over that word. And then to classify the verb, ask the question, what is being said about the subject? And then you put the V over that word. So question number 1, elephants walked. What walked? Elephants, subject, noun. And they can be writing this as you're saying it. What is being said about elephants? Elephants walked, verb. Okay? Boom, that's early in second grade. So, let me see here.
This is level 1.
This is level 1. Okay, well we start that in level 1. Let's see here. So like level 1 here in chapter 3, we start with these sentences. Birds flew slowly. What flew slowly? Birds, subject, noun. What is being said about birds? Birds flew, verb. Birds flew how? Slowly, adverb, because we know from our adverb jingle that an adverb answers how, when, where.
So technically, you should be able to use all the jingles to ask those questions, right? Like, go back to, you know what I mean? Like, because I'm trying to go ahead to like the harder stuff, like article, adjective, and object.
Right. And we'll go
We're
there.
like, I'm out.
Yes. So I was looking for is to see if they have a question and answer flow sheet in that. Is it? It's 10:25. Okay. No, off you go. Sorry. So I'm just going to go through a couple of sentences then from the second, third, and then the fifth. The fifth grade curriculum. So this is something that would have been nice to have the projector for. But Antonio and I will play with you at recess. Who will play with you at recess? Antonio and I. Compound subject noun, CSN. Compound subject pronoun, CSP. What is being said about Antonio and I? Antonio and I will play, verb. Will, helping verb. With, preposition. With whom? You, object of the preposition. At, preposition. At what? Recess, object of the preposition. And, conjunction. Subject, noun, verb, pattern 1. With you, prepositional phrase, put those in parentheses. At recess, prepositional phrase, put that in parentheses. Period statement, declarative sentence. So that's kind of where you're going, like you say where you want to go. So in the students, as they go along, they'll learn all of these steps. So it starts out, as you well know, subject, noun, noun, verb, adverb.
Yeah.
That will be most of your sentences.
I mean,
the
it
first
starts
grade.
just subject, noun, verb, girls
Right. Elephants walked, right? So that's where it starts.
Yeah.
Huh?
I liked those.
Yeah, those are fun.
Got that.
So your students will learn, and the sentence flow kind of tells you like what order. So what order to ask things in. So it's always going to be, of course, finding the subject, noun, and the verb. Those are the key things. And then you'll go back in the sentence and you'll find the adverb by asking how, when, where. You'll find the adjectives by asking what kind, which one, or how many. Then you'll plug in the article adjectives. And so the thing is, one thing that if I could say one thing about this is if you'll go with the question and answer flow and not try and just go in, like I had a child, one of my children thought, I got this, Mom. And he would, in fact, resist me. And he would start filling it in from the beginning to the end. Yeah. That's how he wanted to fill it in. Resist that. Resist it if you can, because you want them to find the key parts of the sentence wherever they're located, because they're not in the same part, because you're going to get to the point where, your verbs are first and all of this stuff, and you want them to have this flow where they're always flowing through the same way, and no matter where it is in the sentence, they can find and locate those things.
Yeah.
And so my son, and I didn't fight hard enough, and I did him a disservice by giving up and letting him fill in, because he didn't have as much success with this curriculum.
Okay.
So
yeah, I'm totally good. Yeah, because she's just like, I'm like, here, do your sheet, we go over to Eden, and then she fills it all in. And
yeah, I know. Unfortunately, this is one of those that if you'd sit with them, it'd be better. Especially even just that top section. After that, some of the editing is hard at the beginning with the capitalization and punctuation rules. That can get a little tricky, maybe need some help. But that first section of every worksheet with the sentences, if you could work through that, that would be helpful for them.
Oh, okay. There are practice sentences, it looks like, at the start of every chapter, so that's helpful for future sentences.
Okay. Where it has the question and answer flow?
Yeah, so this would, I'm so sorry. This
Yep.
would be the question and answer
Yep.
flow, right? So kind of, are those always, I need to see if those always in pink. I don't pick up this book as often as I should, so. Okay, that's helpful. Sorry to ask so many questions.
No,
I really
I'm
want
so
to do
glad.
Blended again next year, but I feel like I'm not prepared enough. It's almost a little easy to skirt by in kindergarten, beginning of first grade, but it gets a lot harder.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, it just helps if you, and again, that's the wonder of the blended model, is you don't have to know, this like a teacher has to know it, but to have a familiarity with it where you can speak into it if your child has questions or make corrections or, on these things.